Good evening, YouTube. It's evening here in Arkansas, past sundown, so that makes it evening. Um, how are y'all today? I hope you're doing well. First off, you know how we all are. Hit that subscribe button, click the like thing, ring the notification bell, and then if you enjoy the video, share it with somebody. Or if you don't enjoy it and you think somebody else will, share it with them anyway. This is Kevin and Lorelei, and we are, well, you can't see Kevin. He's behind the camera. We are Stonecabinadventures. We have a little farm in I get my directions mixed up. West Central, Arkansas, in the Ozarks. So we have incredibly beautiful scenery. I prefer flatland better, but this is still beautiful. Anyway, today we are working on episode 3 of The Life and Times of Pinky Calhoun. So we're going to take you with us back to the year 1880, and Pinky's a mess. So, you know, you got to love her. Got to love whoever invented reading glasses. Pinky Calhoun, episode 3. You still playing with the camera, love?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Ma claims I'm smarter than a village idiot. I've never seen a village, so maybe she's right. Our town has a dafty. I don't know if a dafty is the same thing as an idiot, but it's probably pretty close. Our dafty's name is Billy Joe McClendon. I taught him how to write his name. He's sort of my friend. I don't know why he wears that funny blue hat pulled down over his ears. I asked him, and he said the hat makes his life easier. Billy Joe looks like a man and works as hard as one, but he can't read or write, only his name. He lives in a little room in the blacksmith's barn. I think he's 15, maybe 20. I'm 8. Well, we'll be at Christmas. As long as Billy Joe has a friend like me to help him figure things out, he does okay. Billy Joe works at Mr. Kruger's store. He carries the heavy stuff and sweeps up. I seen him pick a barrel of tar up off the walkway and set it in the back of the Gates' wagon while Mr. Gates and his son Rufus were jawing about how to get it moved. Billy Joe kind of squatted, wrapped his gorilla arms around it, picked it up, walked to the wagon, and set it down easy. Rufus went to find some men to help move the heavy thing and fell all over himself when it was missing. He had a stupid look on his face. Billy Joe had already gone back to Kruger's for some penny candy. I looked up at that meano Rufus and I bragged. Yes, sir, Rufus Gates, it was me. I did it. I moved that stinky barrel all by myself. You're welcome. Then I sashayed off to find Billy Joe and to get part of his candy, and to repent for lying. I'm not sure repenting counts if you don't mean it, and I don't mean to quit lying to Rufus. I never saw such a brain-damaged look on anyone's face as on Rufus's face that day. He wanted to call me a liar, but to the best of his knowledge, no one else had been there who could have moved it. He learned better than to call me a liar last summer. When he called me a liar, I chunked a rock and hit him in the face. Of course, that time I wasn't lying. He still has a scar in the middle of his one big eyebrow. Pa made him apologize for saying such a horrible word to my face. Mr. Gates said I should apologize to Rufus for throwing a rock at him. Sweet as sugar, I blurted out. Rufus Gates, you're as worthless as a dead skunk. But I am right sorry. You were so awful to me that I had to hit you with a rock. Don't call me a liar no more, and I won't have to bloody up your face. So, yeah, me and Rufus have an ugly history. The next day, my brother Elmer and me was walking home from fishing, cutting through the woods like always. Rufus ran up and jumped Elmer from behind. He was beating him up pretty good. I felt bad about that because I knew he jumped Elmer to get even with me. Elmer had landed a few good fists, but Rufus was older and meaner. I grabbed a stick from a dead tree and whacked Rufus across the back with it. A little broken off stub of a branch poked him. He squealed like a stuck hog, and he bled like one too. I'd made a hole in his shirt, and blood ran everywhere. Elmer hadn't seen me hit Rufus, so when he quit fighting for an instant, Elmer hit him in the jaw with all the pain and anger and fear he had in him. Rufus fell over like he'd been kicked in the head by a mule. We left him laying there bleeding and went to the river to clean Elmer's hands and face. We aren't the only kids to have problems with Rufus, but Elmer and him haven't gotten in a fight since. I hadn't walked halfway across the street before I had to turn around and look back at Rufus. He glared at me like he wanted to beat me up. He looked at that barrel of tar and he threatened me with his eyes. But he don't dare hit me. I'm a girl. Maybe some places men get away with hitting women, but not in our town, especially when the man is mostly grown up and the woman is still a little girl. Most especially when that little girl's paw can shoot the spots off a cart at 50 paces with either hand. Pa came out of the store about then. Rufus hollered across the street to ask Pa if he moved their barrel. Pa thought Rufus was accusing him of stealing it, so that conversation got heated in a hurry. Rufus and his pa are both hotheads. My pa don't back up neither. I gave up on getting candy and dragged Pa over there and asked him, "Did you move that stinky barrel into the Gates' wagon?" I batted my eyes and fluttered my hand by my nose to signify how bad that tar barrel smelled. Pa shook his head. "No, I suppose I could help move it back." Pa turned to the angry boy. "We need some help, though. Those tar barrels are heavy." I dusted off my hands and I agreed. "They sure are." I took one of Pa's hands in mine and smelled it. "Nope. Smells like horses and leather, not like stinky barrels." Rude Rufus bellowed, "I don't want it out of my wagon." Pa asked, "What exactly is the problem with the barrel?" "I want to know who put it in my wagon." I could see Pa trying to figure out how to solve the problem without making them angrier. "Sorry, I can't help you with that." Rufus yelled and cussed and threw his hat, and Mr. Gates came over and started bellowing about people who can't leave other people's stuff alone. Pa shrugged and walked off. He swung me up one-handed and put me in the back of our wagon. I knew to listen when he leaned close. Those Gateses have anger problems. Anytime they don't like or understand something, they get mad. Don't let anger become one of your problems. I promised him I wouldn't. I don't get angry. I take care of problems sneaky-like. I have patience and a long memory. The next morning, when I got to Mr. Harkin's house, his lunch and supper from the day before still sat on his table. I ate all of the lettuce and some of the radishes. If they'd sat there much longer, they'd have gone limp, and I'd have had to feed them to his chickens or to Rosie. I checked his bed, and if he slept in it, he made it up himself. I can't figure why he'd do that. He says that's what he pays me for. Mr. Harkin needs a wife bad like, but he don't want one. He says wives whine about what they don't have. He's met Ma. She don't whine about nothing. Maybe he had a whiny wife once. Maybe more than once. Pondering on how many wives he'd gone through gave me something to think about. I fed and watered his stock. Maggie, his mare, looked lonely in the corral by herself, so I walked her down by the creek and tied her to a tree so that she could eat the grass out there. I figured if she had plenty to eat, she wouldn't have time to be lonely. I just knew something bad had happened to Mr. Harkin. I tried to figure out why he wouldn't come home from his mine unless he couldn't. I like to think I'm brave. Ma says I'm braver than I am smart. I don't know about that, but I decided maybe I should see if I could find my boss. If he disappeared, he wouldn't pay me for my work. After I did my chores and made lunch, I headed to his mine. He doesn't dig gold out of it. He digs rocks that he says have gold in 'em. I'd seen his mine before. Me and Billy Joe sneaked over to the mine to watch him one day. Mr. Harkin breaks up rocks with a hammer. Then he cooks some of those little pieces in an ugly old witch's cauldron. Me and Billy Joe swore not to tell anyone, 'cause they'd say we were fibbing. But he had a big fire going with his witchy pot cooking. If he'd have added toads or bats or stuff from a cemetery, like bones or dust or locks of hair, we'd have left in a hurry. But all he cooked was those little pieces of old rocks. After a while of cooking rocks, he poured those rock meltings into little round shapes. Those rocks made some of the shiniest stuff I'd ever seen. Now, maybe it's gold and maybe it's not. But he ended up with 5 of those little circles. He put them in an old leather bag and tied it up tight. And he carried his bag back into his mine. We counted, and he stayed in his mine for a slow count of 147. I guess that's about 75 man steps into the mine where he hides his gold. On our way home, I had Billy Joe stand still, and I walked 75 big steps away from him. When I looked back at my friend, I realized how far down in the belly of the earth I'd have to go to get a look at the gold. Me and Billy Joe decided we didn't need to see his gold that bad. 75 steps that I would never take to see a gold stash is a long way. 100 or 1,000 steps to find out what happened to a man I didn't particularly like seemed infinitely further. I just stood inside that mine staring at that black hole of death until my clothes were nearly soaked through with sweat. I picked up my walking stick and my canteen and I stepped on in. I told myself being brave meant doing stuff despite being afraid. I'm not sure I believed me. Locusts sang in the trees, fish and frogs splashed in the creek, chickens cackled, and Rosie grunted around in her pen. I left the world I knew and wondered if I'd ever see that or my family again. I looked for signs of a cave-in, but I didn't see any. If the mine had caved in, dust should have been everywhere. Dust covered everything all right, but just regular summer dust, not a heavy, poofed out of the earth's guts kind of dust. I hadn't even gone 100 scared steps into the mine before I realized I needed candles or a lantern. Every step tightened my innards into knots. If I had eaten lunch, it would have come back up. I kept hearing the mine breathe. I heard all kinds of animals and creepy crawlies spying on me, tracking me, hunting me, haunting me. I turned around and headed back for candles. I may be braver than I am smart, but that don't count for much if I'm barely smarter than a dafty. When I had taken 17 steps back toward the sun and life, I saw a little room Mr. Harkin had dug off to one side. I hadn't seen the opening when I walked forward, but I sure saw it on my way back out. I should have seen that room. A skinny little crack in the roof let light trickle in. He had a table and a chair, but I didn't see any leather bags or gold. On the table were pencils and paper. I wrote a note to let everybody know where I'd gone and why. I took the note to Mr. Harkin's house and left it on the table with his food. I left my walking stick there, too. If I had taken the note home, Ma wouldn't let me go find him. She'd send Pa or Elmer. I figure if the mine had caved in on Mr. Harkin, it might cave in again on me. And if it caved in on Pa, we'd be in trouble. Our family needs Pa a lot more than we need me. So I wrote my note, and it said, Mr. Harkin is missing. I'm gone to find him. He might be in his mine. That's where I'll be if I'm dead. Love, Pinky. I put the last of the radishes on the note to hold it in case a breeze come up before I got back. And then I thought, since I might not get back, and that thought troubled me. It troubled me sorely bad. I nearly shed a tear. but then remembered hitting that catfish in the river before I became fish food. I had to make it back so I could catch that monster fish. And Pa needed to have the blacksmith make me a special hook big enough to catch the thing. If I didn't make it back, I might end up having the greatest adventure of all. Or nothing would matter because I'd be dead. If that happened, they needed to know where to start looking. Thank you for listening. We love you all. Again, we are Stone Cabin Adventures, Lorelei and Kevin. He's over behind the camera. Like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and please share it. Share it on Facebook, Instagram, email it to your friends. Seriously, that would be doing me a huge favor. So, we love you guys. Thank you for listening. And as always, we will see you on the next video. God bless. Mwah.